For those of you who have been asking, so we've got a lot of questions about this. How do you get into the competitive scene with Pokemon? How do you start? There's so much to learn. There's over 720 Pokemon that you have to learn about. I mean, the metagame is pretty small, but where do you guys start? Where would you say is the best place for super, super beginners?
Super beginners should probably go to ign.com/wikis and check out some of our Pokemon guides for beginners.
You may have written those, just a guess.
Yeah. So Brendan, you're on the Wikis team.
Yes.
So you know, like that's a good place to go for if you don't know any terms or if you're looking up items or something. Our Wiki has a lot of that.
Yeah, it's a great starter guide for kind of figuring out what Pokemon do, like the move dexes and how different things work with stab and like who attacks first, special effectiveness, the abilities, how they play in. And then once you've got that idea, once you've got the basics down, then you kind of want to learn the strategies, and that's kind of when some of the bigger, the communities who focus on that come into play, because we can't cater to all types at IGN. We try and help at least for the guides content, for people who are like, what am I doing here? How do do I even beat this game? Like, how do I beat the Elite Four? That's where we kind of help in, and then once people springboard off of that, there's a lot of places you can go, and I think you know a lot of those.
Smogon! Smogon's my favorite because you can look up any Pokemon and it'll have strategies for every tier. So Smogon has these kind of fan-invented, unofficial battle tiers based on the Pokemon's use. So they're like overused, underused. If you don't want to use like legendaries or something, overused and underused are pretty good. There's Little Cup, which is all like unevolved Pokemon, so you can use like Smoochum or something. Not that I would use
really
Smoochum,
cute.
but it's really cute. I really like Smogon because, so this is my like first tip, I think, if you want to get into the competitive scene at all, or playing competitively even with your friends, like not even professionally or anything, is to pick a favorite Pokemon and look it up on Smogon, and see what strategies are available, and familiarize yourself with the terms, like, you know, what is a Pokemon's role? How does it, you know, is it an all-out attacker? Is it a support? Is it, you know, what is its use? And they also have tips for team building. So if I look up, you know, Sylveon, it'll say, you know, this Pokemon coordinates well with these other Pokemon, and you can use this strategy. And it's just a good but next intermediate step for starting to team build.
Yeah,
it's really interesting.
I think breeding really helped me a lot.
Yeah.
I think that the way that I started breeding was just by looking it up online, Googling, looking at YouTube videos, but it teaches you just a lot about stats and how they interact with each other and balancing out specific kinds of Pokemon. So I think that's super important and is a really good foundation for figuring out your team. But also there are regional events everywhere.
Sure.
Pretty much everywhere in the world has regional competitive events. I used to go to them in a kind of small city in Australia, so definitely look into those because the communities there are always awesome. And you know, you see everything up on a huge projector and you can see what everyone's doing.
Yeah.
And I was always surprised, like, seeing people use, when I first went, entirely like weather-based stuff, and a lot of people using smokescreen. And when I was just getting into it, I had no idea that people would play that way. So it's cool to see it firsthand.
I was never a weather person until I saw one of those, and I was like,
and you're like, oh, I need that.
Weather teams. That's a great one. Like, just practice, like play test a team. Back to the point of breeding, though, I use Cerebi to get a lot of resources, because resources on what berries work for if you mess up your EVs or something. That's not a super big problem anymore with super training. But breeding, the best way to start with that is just to look it up, because there's a lot of good starter guides. Basically, the way I get Pokemon as like my parent Pokemon is through Wonder Trade, because a lot of people will send out their like breeding trash, and it's usually like not trash. It's like if you're looking for a Pokemon with, you know, 5 perfect IVs, so 5 31s, then you can get one with maybe 4 of them that somebody was like, well, this is my throwaway because I was looking for 5. And then you get that 4, and it's a great like starting point, catalyst to a breeding line. And I've spent a lot of time hatching eggs. But once you get the hang of it and you get a routine, you like watch TV and like ride around on your bike. And,
I with X and Y, the city that you can ride around in circles, I basically stuck something under. So while I was sleeping, it would just ride around in circles, and then I'd wake up and be like, sweet.
You get a lot
lazy.
It's a good way. You can't do that in Omega Ruby Alpha Sapphire because you have to like physically turn. And I was so bummed. I was like, I want to do the circle trick. So yeah, just familiarize. I'm having such trouble with words today.
It's a hard word.
It's late on a Thursday.
It's late on a
fine.
Thursday, and I've been thinking about Pokemon all week.
Okay.
But yeah, just learn the terms. EV training is easier than ever with Super Training.
Yeah.
Sun and Moon are going to introduce Hyper Training.
It'll be super easy with Sun and Moon, and I'm
Yeah.
kind of hoping that Pokemon Go hype brings a lot of people into Sun and Moon as well, and it's such
too.
A simple way to get involved in the competitive scene as well because of hyper training. So
Yeah, and
it's all very exciting.
if you're into Pokemon Go at all, you might be into competitive Pokemon a little bit because you might be looking at stats. If you're into CP, if you want your Pokemon with the
Check
highest
out the new
CP.
appraisal feature of this one up.
Exactly, from the Pokemon Go update. If you're into that, breeding in Pokemon especially ties into a lot of that compulsion I have when I'm in Pokemon Go to get a higher CP Pokemon.
Totally.
And then I think the last tip I have is going to Pokemon.com to look at pro players' teams, and that's where you can get a lot of inspiration. I wouldn't say necessarily copy those teams because a lot of them take a lot of skill to use. Wolf Glick's team, the VGC champion this year, his took so much skill to use. He beat a mirror team with that team because he knows how to play it.
Yeah.
But at least knowing what Pokemon people are using and what do pro players consider good.
Yeah, and I also think figuring out why is a good way to learn. Looking at why is this person using this with all of these things, and when you can get an understanding of how the teams work together and the importance of that teamwork, then you can probably learn a lot about the game as a whole.
Right, that's where I went first to figure out, once legendaries were introduced, I was like, what legendaries are people using? Because I didn't really know where to begin with that. And then I saw Groudon, Kyogre, Rayquaza. I was like, okay.
Yeah.
That goes a lot for both the video and the trading card game. No matter what, if you find, and back when I played Magic the Gathering, they had championship decks. And half of the fun is he used this. Okay, I have his deck, now I must be able to win. But knowing how they used it and why these cards were good or why those Pokemon were good is half of the battle, is figuring out how they used them, what situations they work in, and which ones they don't, and knowing when to fight your battles.
Them good.
Yeah.
It's fighting through the games and beating the Elite Four is very simple compared to competitive Pokemon. I feel you just level up enough and you're fine, but competitive Pokemon is a whole other thing.
Yeah, and that's when you go find a regional tournament.
Exactly.
And practice.
And watch the pros
Watch
and
'em.
see what they're doing and why they're doing it, and just see when they're switching, okay, why did he do that? And try and predict what they're going to do, and it kind of helps you learn as well.
Yeah, it's kind of like chess in that way.
Yeah.
It really is.
Yeah.
And I actually had a lot of fun trying to predict because when I was watching all the games from the World Championships this year, I was like, I have no idea. These people are next level. I don't know where they're going with this. And it inspired me to practice more and play more. And then I went home and I played. And I was like, I have so far to go.
I also really want to say, we're kind of making it sound intimidating. The community is also lovely.
Yes.
Every single person that I spoke to at the World Champs was giving each other advice and really happy to see other people there, and everyone was very excited to be there. So it's there's so much support from other people. There's Facebook groups, there's Twitter pages, there's just an abundance of people you can talk to who will help you and want you to succeed as well. It's a fun thing, despite winning a ton of money.
Yeah,
at the World Championships.
Right. It's competitive and people care about winning, but all the players I've spoken to in over the years that I've been following the scene are in it because they just love Pokemon.
Yeah.
I think that's the real point, is how do you get into competitive Pokemon? You gotta love Pokemon.
Yeah, totally.
Love it and you will find your way. There's also YouTube resources.
Yeah.
There's just pro players who give a lot of tips because they want to foster that community.
Yeah, streamers as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's awesome.
Yeah, so let us know if you get into competitive Pokemon. We want to hear how it went for you.